Hello and welcome back to my April TBR video. I am going to be sharing the 22 books that I have on my list to read in April, and I'm also going to be doing my alphabet challenge, which is where I pick a random letter from the alphabet and then choose 5 books from my Kindle pile of what I already own and add those to my list of 17 books that I already have chosen for the month. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through the books that I have on my list, and then we'll do the alphabet challenge. So the first book that I have on my list for this month is called The Collaborative Habit by Twyla Tharp. And I have read a couple of books by Twyla Tharp. She has a book called The Creative Habit. She has another book on creativity and aging that I really enjoyed. And this is kind of the latest book that I found from her. Assuming it's about collaboration. I do a lot of that in my work and looking forward to reading it. What I appreciate about her books is they have a wonderful design on the inside, and she often has like activities and like practical things that you can do to practice what she's talking about. So looking forward to diving into that one. The next one that I have on my list is a book that I stumbled across called But You're Still So Young by Kayleen Schaefer. And this is a book about how 30-somethings are redefining adulthood. And as a 30-something, I just thought it sounded interesting. It's relatively short, just a little over 200 pages. So I thought I would be able to get through this relatively quickly this month. I was able to get this book from my local library, and I'm just kind of curious about the points that she's making, the research that she's done. Next up, I have also kind of a smaller book, about 250 pages, The Practice by Seth Godin. This is one of Seth Godin's most recent books. He is an online kind of marketing guru, and I've read several of his books in the past, and this is one that is specifically about kind of getting your creative work out into the world. And I was also able to get this from my local library, so wanted to add it to the TBR pile for this month. The next book that I chose is called Creative Directions by Jason Sperling. And this is a book that you'll notice there's a lot of nonfiction so far this month. And actually what I did was I went through my Kindle wish list and picked out a bunch of books that I wanted to like test drive basically. And I was able to get a bunch of them from my local library. So this is another one that falls into that category. This book is about how you lead creative teams, and I'm in the process of building teams out at my work and doing some hiring. And so this is one that I thought would be really interesting to do a deeper dive into. And I always really enjoy books about kind of leadership and management, but particularly when they tie into creative work. That's definitely a sweet spot for me. So looking forward to this one. The next one that I have on my list is called 1 Degree Revolution by Kobe Kozlowski. And this is a book about yoga and kind of building yoga practice into your daily life, but not just the physical practice of yoga, other forms of yoga as well. And I try to read books on yoga on a relatively regular basis. I haven't had a lot of reading of them this calendar year thus far. I am a certified yoga teacher. I did yoga training over the course of the pandemic. And so I like to build in something like this into my schedule on a pretty regular basis. And this is a book, again, I had on kind of my Kindle wish list and decided to take it for a test drive. Was able to get it from my local library and excited to add that to my list this month. The next book that I chose for this month is called How to Have a Good Day by Caroline Webb. This is a book that I actually saw one of my people that I follow on social media was talking about this book. And I'm always interested in books that are about like increasing productivity or increasing, meaningfulness at work or in your daily life. And this one definitely seems to fall into that category. I am definitely feeling the need to do a little more nonfiction reading lately, and this is another one that I'm adding to the pile. So definitely a lot more nonfiction this month because I feel like I've been a little fiction heavy this year. So looking forward to diving into this one too. Okay, now shifting over into some fiction. The next book I have on my list is called Find Me by Alifair Burke. And this is a book in a series that has a detective that's a regular kind of recurring character in Alifair Burke's books. And I've read several of her other books with this character. And it's a detective who is obviously solving crimes. And in this particular book, the premise is you have a woman who has some kind of like amnesia, and she's found after a car accident, doesn't know who she is, and basically builds a life without understanding what her history is. And then eventually she actually goes missing. And so the story is about trying to find her and trying to kind of understand her past. I don't know much more about that other than the general plot, but I have always really enjoyed Alistair Burke's books in the past, so looking forward to that. The next book I chose is Jodi Picoult's most recent novel called Wish You Were Here. And I don't know much about this one either, other than I believe it is set during the COVID pandemic. I think it is about a woman who's traveling and she gets kind of stuck somewhere because of the pandemic. And then the book kind of goes on from there. I have heard some people say that this is a bit challenging to read, given that we're kind of still in the pandemic. But Jodi Picoult always pulls kind of like ripped from the headlines topics, and I always appreciate the research that she does and the care that she takes with these kinds of plots. So I'm curious to see kind of what I think about this book. The next book that I chose is called The Bright Side Running Club by Josie Lloyd. I honestly can't remember where I heard about this book, but it basically focuses on a woman who has a cancer diagnosis, and as part of her coping for that, she joins a running club and has kind of a group of women who come around her in support of how she is going through this process of treating her cancer. This is a book that I chose because I always like to have, I mean, it doesn't sound like a light topic, but I do like literary fiction that focuses on kind of relationships between women, women supporting other women. And when I stumbled across this one, it just seemed kind of interesting to me. So added that to my pile for this month. The next book that I chose is called The Night Shift by Alex Finlay. And this is a book that's been getting a lot of hype. It is a kind of a cold case mystery combined with a present day mystery, which is one of my favorite forms of mystery. And the general storyline is that you have a group of workers, like I think they're teenagers at a Blockbuster video store. And I think it's like 15 years ago, they are attacked and there's one survivor. And then come to present day, there's a bunch of kids in an ice cream parlor working there. They also get attacked. And there's connections between kind of the attack that happened 15 years ago and the attack that's happening in present day. And we're going kind of back and forth to try to solve what's going on. The person who survived the first attack is involved in kind of investigating the second attack. So I'm interested because I've heard a lot of people say great things about this book and really curious to see what I think. The next book I added to my list is the 6th book in the Louise Penny Gamage series called Bury Your Dead. I mentioned in my March debrief video that this last book that I read in the series had kind of an interesting twist that opens up a lot of possibilities for where the series can go. And so I'm really curious to see where the author takes it from here. My understanding is that the basic plot is Gamage is like on leave, but he gets wrapped up into a case while he's on leave. And I think it takes place outside of Three Pines, which is the normal setting where this book takes place. So kind of a departure from what normally happens in this series, but looking forward to it. The next book that I picked is called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is a book that I actually tried to read a couple of months ago and I had to return it back to the library. So I'm going to try it again, see if I can get through it. I have it on audio this time. The general premise of this book is there's a woman who kind of makes a deal with the devil where she can meet people, but they can never remember who she is. And she has more longevity in her life. So she lives past the typical age. She's kind of, I don't know if she can live forever, but she can live for a really long time, but no one ever remembers her. And so she'll have an interaction with someone and then she'll like run into them on the street 15 minutes later and they won't remember who she is. In this book, there ends up being a situation where she runs into someone and then he does remember her. And so the story kind of unfolds from there. Looking forward to diving into that one. I also added Nora Roberts' Of Blood and Bone to my list for this month. This is the next book in the series of the Year One, which I read in March. This is a plague narrative about people who are surviving a plague, and then they develop magical powers. Some of those powers are for evil, some of them are for good, and really looking forward to diving into the next part of this story. The way that it left off in the first book, I was really curious to see what was going to happen next. Okay, the next book that I chose is called Box 88 by Charles Cumming. I happened to just stumble across this book at my local library on the new books shelf, and then I was able to find it on audio as well. This is a book that is kind of not typical for what I would read. I think it's kind of like a spy novel, where it's about a man who's part of a kind of secret organization that it's kind of like MI5, but it's not MI5 in Britain. And he is trying to solve, like a crime or a mystery. And it just sounded kind of interesting. And I like to try new authors. I've never read this author before, so I decided to add it to my list for April. Okay, just a few more, and then we'll do the alphabet challenge. The next book that I have on my list is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. And this is a book that's part of the Crescent City series. There's also another recent book that came out in this series, and everybody talks about this. I've never read a Sarah J. Maas before. As you can tell, I'm easily influenced by people who talk about books a lot, and I want to know, like, what's the hype all about? This is a book that's about 800 pages long. The general premise is there is a woman who is a fae. There's also I think werewolves and other kinds of creatures in this universe. So this is fantasy for sure, world building for sure. And she has a bunch of friends that are killed and attacked by, I think, some kind of demon, and then she is trying to solve the crime of what happened. And she teams up with this other character who ends up, I think, being kind of a romantic love interest for her. And so I'm really curious about this because I've just heard a ton about it. Some people really love it. I have it on audio, and I have it in hard copy, and I have it on ebook. So I'll be able to kind of switch back and forth because it's so lengthy. Another longer book that I have on my list for this month is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clark. This book is just shy of about 870 pages. This is a book that I think is about a little bit of like the history of magic in the UK, and takes place, I think, in the 19th century. I don't know much about it. I did read like the first couple chapters of this book a while back and actually really enjoyed it, but had to kind of set it aside because I had other things I was doing. So I did get this on audio. I really find that these longer books on audio are so much easier for me to get through. So I really appreciate that, but really looking forward to this one. And then the last book I have on this to be read pile is The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. This is the next book in the Robert Jordan Wheel of Time series. It does clock in at over 1,000 pages, so I am glad that I have it on audio. I also happen to have it in hard copy, and I have no idea where the series is going. I don't really do a lot of reading ahead to understand like what the plots are of the books as they unfold, throughout the series. But really looking forward to checking in with the next book and kind of seeing what's going on there. I will say over the last several months, I was just kind of reflecting on this. I am just not intimidated at all by these really long books because I've read so many of them recently. So if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, I can never read a book of 1,000 pages, what I have found is the more you do it, the easier it gets, especially if you're used to reading them on audio or something that is relatively easy to kind of speed up, what you're reading. And so it's not uncommon for me to read multiple, 500 plus page books in a month. And on average, I'm reading maybe a little bit more than about 8,000 pages a month this year. That's what it ends up kind of averaging out to be when I look at those page counts every month. So that means that I can often add in, quite a few books of varying lengths. And I appreciate that it's not as intimidating as it once was. Okay, so I am going to pull my alphabet letter here and then take a look at what I might want to read that falls into that category. All right, so I'm gonna pick a random letter. Okay, so the letter I picked is one that I have already drawn. So I'm actually gonna pick another letter. I wondered if this would happen at some point, and I wanna try to get as much randomized titles as I can. So I picked F. I'm gonna set this aside because I have already done an F letter. Okay. The next one that I picked is actually a wild card. I put a couple of these in to the mix. So I have to think about what that means and what I am looking for here. Let's see. So I'm gonna go to my list. All right, so I'm gonna pick a random letter here and see what I can come up with. I'm gonna choose the letter N. And let me scroll here to see what I have in this N category, and I'll pick some to read. Okay, let's see here. So the first one I'm gonna choose is called Never See Me Coming by Vera Kurian. And let me see if I can find out any information about this book. Okay, so this sounds like there is a woman character in this book who is part of an unusual clinical study of psychopaths. So she is a psychopath, and then one of the students in the study is found murdered, and the book unravels from there. So this is definitely a mystery. So I'm gonna pick that as my first of the N books, Never Saw Me Coming. Let's see, the next book I'm going to choose, I'm going to choose No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is a book that I have heard so much about. It was recently made into an adaptation. My understanding is this is kind of a locked door mystery, and that there's a bunch of people who are gathered at a rest stop, and then one of the people there, like the main character, sees children like trapped in a car and thinks they're being kidnapped or something like that, but she doesn't know who the car belongs to. They're all stuck at this rest stop because of like a snowstorm or something, and so everybody's like trapped there, and she's trying to unravel this kind of mystery. That's kind of what I know about it at a high level. So I will add that to my list as well. I've been wanting to read that actually for a really long time. Let's see what else I want to add here. I'm also going to add 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty. I've read some things by Liane Moriarty. I believe she's an author from Australia or New Zealand. 9 Perfect Strangers, of course, was made into an adaptation, but I've never read the book. And so I'm kind of curious to see what that's all about, because I have definitely heard people talking about that. So I will add that to my list here. All right, and then let's pick a couple more. Let's see here. I'm also going to pick The Nest by Cynthia Sweeney. And this is a book I've also had on my list for quite some time. And I'm just looking it up to see exactly what it's about. So this says it's a book about 4 adult siblings and the fate of a shared inheritance that has shaped their choices and their lives. This is a book that I think is a relatively popular book. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was published in 2016, and I haven't gotten around to it yet. So I'm going to read that one as well. Okay, I need one more. I think I might try to pick something that's a little more nonfiction. Let me see if I have anything here that fits that bill. I'm going to pick a book that just sounds interesting to me that I have on my list here. It's called Nurse, Come You Here? More True Stories of a Country Nurse on a Scottish Isle by Mary McLeod. And it just sounds interesting to me. So I'm going to take a look at it. It looks like it's part of a series called the Country Nurse series. So I will dive into that. So I have Nurse Come You Here. I have No Exit, 9 Perfect Strangers, Never Saw Me Coming, and The Nest. And those are going to be the 5 extra books that I add to my pile for the month of April. I'd love to hear what you're reading in the month of April. Feel free to drop a comment down below, and I'll be back at the end of the month with a bit of a debrief on how this is looking. Thanks for watching.